In this sharp attacking position from the Sicilian Najdorf, Bobby Fischer missed a stunning move which would have led to an immediate win for white. Pause the video and see if you can find it. So the move was queen to h5. This removes the queen from this pin by the bishop. It allows g6 next move. And now black will be forced to play h6. We'll capture on h6 because of this pin, and we'll be delivering checkmate next move. So if black goes king to g8 to remove the king from this diagonal, we can go f6. Now, of course, if black takes, we'll recapture, and this open g-file will be suicidal for black. So black's forced to go rook fe8. We can then either just win a piece with f takes e7, or we can take on g7 and put pressure on this f7 pawn, forcing black to give up his queen. Here we have the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian. Bobby Fischer plays bishop c4, the Lipnitsky attack. His idea is to drop the bishop back to b3, where it will support a kingside attack by putting pressure on e6 and f7. He wants to castle kingside and launch a kingside Pawnstorm, so it's a much riskier way of playing the Najdorf. Black goes e6, blocking the attack. White castles, bishop e7 and bishop e3. Now, white's long-term plan is f4, bring the queen out to f3, bring the rook to d1, and then launch a kingside Pawnstorm by pushing the f and g pawns. Meanwhile, black will play the normal Najdorf setup with queen c7, b5, bishop to b7 and knight bd7. Then he'll advance on the queen side and put pressure along this long diagonal. He'll aim to slow white's kingside attack down this way. Another way white could have played, which is more positional, is a4, with the idea of going a5, clamping down on the queen side, and then rather than launch a kingside Pawnstorm, if he then just goes bishop e3, brings the queen to e2, and then the rook to d1, he'll be controlling the d-file and dissuading black from playing d5. If black does play d5, he'll end up with an isolated d-pawn. But anyway, Bobby Fischer didn't do this. He went bishop e3, black castles, and now he continued the plan with bishop b3. He knows that black will play queen c7 or knight c6, a5 sooner or later and force that anyway. Again, Bobby Fischer could have played a4, queen c7, and then queen e2 is good. Just play rook d1, f3 or f4, and then threaten e5 later on. But Bobby Fischer played bishop e3, knight c6, f4, continuing the plan, knight e5, and here Bobby Fischer played an inaccuracy with queen f3. Now a much better move is e5 immediately. You always want to play this thrust as soon as possible in the Sicilian, either e5 or f5. If black captures, we'll recapture, the knight's forced to come to d5. If we take, black recaptures, and then we can start to put pressure on this d5 pawn. We're threatening rook d1. If knight takes b3, we'll just recapture, and then black's bishop pair counts for very little because his light squared bishop will be forced to defend this pawn on d5. If instead black just plays knight takes b3 immediately, we'll be winning material with takes, and then after queen takes we are up 2 minor pieces for rook. If black instead plays knight e8, we can go queen h5. Now this is always a great idea. Put the queen right into the opponent's kingside, even if you're not threatening anything, because this queen's doing so many jobs. Maybe later on white will play g4 and f5, in which case the queen supports. The queen also defends the pawn on e5. If this knight ever came into the game, it could be supporting mate on h7, things like this. So if white had played this way, it would have been more aggressive and better, but instead Bobby Fischer played queen f3. The normal game plan is ideas g4, g5, f5. Maybe he'll play king h1 to get the king off this diagonal. But of course it's very ropey because black still wants to go b5, bishop b7 and attack down this diagonal. Anyway, black went queen c7, very sensible, g4, and now knight takes b3. And Bobby Fischer again played an inaccuracy with a takes b3. Now, I understand that you want to recapture towards the centre, but c takes b3 makes so much more sense. Remember this structure because it slows down black's minority attack in the Sicilian really well. Black cannot break this structure down, and it also opens the c-file for our rook. We'll be playing rook c1. We can even double on the c-file and then penetrate because black's several moves away from bringing the rook to the c-file himself. We'll have to play b5, bishop b7, move the queen, and then play rook c8, by which time we'll have doubled our rooks. So this would have been a more positional way to play the position. I can see why Bobby Fischer didn't want to do this because he was fixated on this Pawnstorm. Anyway, he went a takes b3, rook b8, g5. Gaining time on the knight. Now we go f5. Now in the main line of the Najdorf, this would be a sacrifice, but the bishop defends the g5 pawn, and so we're just putting pressure on black's centre. Our threat here is takes, recaptures, and then after queen g3 we'll be threatening this weak e6 pawn. So black goes knight e5 to enter this hole we've just created. We go queen g3, we're fine with this. This is a very common manoeuvre in the Sicilian, get the queen on the same file as the king. Maybe we will bring rook to f2 and maybe even g2, attack down the g file. Our long-term plan is to bring the queen to h4 and then h5 and then advance g6, threatening mate on h7. Meanwhile, black is still playing b5. He might go bishop d7 or bishop b7. He will want to play b4, kick away this knight, weaken our control over d5 and then play d5 himself, which is always black's equalising move in the Sicilian. Anyway, black goes king h8, a mistake. What he should have done instead is just play b5, his normal plan, but he got spooked and played king h8. I can understand, but white had a win here, which again Bobby Fischer missed. This was only the 1950s, so he's still quite young and inexperienced. White could have gone rook f4 with the idea of rook h4, queen h3, and then mate along the h file is impossible to stop basically. So rook f4, if black plays d5, trying to open the centre, we can just play rook h4, and if he takes on f5 we'll be taking on d5, otherwise he can't prevent this build up. So if instead black goes b5, rook h4, rook d8 or something, just to show white's plan, queen h3, black's forced to play h6. Now we can go f6, we're putting so much pressure on black's king side. We'll be threatening to take, we're also threatening to take with check and then capture on h6, maybe even sacrifice the exchange, and black is just losing here. But anyway, Bobby Fish didn't do this. He played knight f3, trying to get rid of this active knight and create double pawns. Black took, we take. This also allows us to double up on the f file. Black played b5 and now queen h4. This is our plan. Very simple, ooga booga, double on the h file and deliver checkmate, but it's very effective. Black goes e takes f5. Now here Bobby Fischer recaptured. He could have gone knight d5. I think this is better because you immediately occupy the strong outpost. You're threatening to capture this defender, which is a linchpin of black's position, because this pawn cannot go to g6 while the bishop is pinning it against the queen. If we remove this bishop, we can then threaten g6, so black will be forced to play queen d8. We can then take on f5, and then black could play something like bishop takes g5. That's what the computer recommends because his position is so bad. But if he goes rook e8 or something, we'll be going f6 next move, potentially supported by rook f1. Anyway, going back to this position, black played queen c6, rook af1, knight e4 was slightly better to support f6 immediately. Now, black's defense looks pretty miserable, but he has one key resource, which is threatening mate on g2, which pins this rook, and he's also got the option of simplifying the position by capturing and rook capturing and bishop takes f3, which trades a queen for two rooks. Then black would have a bishop pair and a rook pair, and he could maybe hold the endgame. Now, again, white had a win here, which Bobby Fischer missed again, queen h5. Now, if black, for example, plays b4, he can go bishop to d4, pinning the g-pawn. Now, g6 is an ugly threat because if black plays h6 to counter, we can take on h6 and then capture on g7 with mate. So black will be forced to play king g8, we can go f6, and black's defense is collapsing. Of course he can't take and open the g-file because that would just be checkmate, so he'd have to play something like rook fe8, where we're threatening to win material. We can also just capture on g7 and this pawn will be under siege. Bobby Fischer again did not see queen h5, which was a vital resource to unpin this g-pawn. Now white goes bishop d4, setting up this ugly threat of queen h5, g6, forcing h6, then capturing on h6 with check, leading to checkmate. Black plays b4 again, queen h5 would have won via this same plan, but instead Bobby Fischer played bishop takes g7, and this allows a very tricky defense, which I can understand why Fischer didn't see. So black captures on g7, queen h6 check, the king goes back to h8, and now g6. Black here went wrong playing queen c5 check. He opted for the active defence with check, then capturing on g6 and going check on g5, trying to exchange the queens and surviving that way, but it just loses, which I'll explain in a minute. He had a very hard to see defence, which was f takes g6, captures, now rook f7, defending h7, actually the only move that defends h7. And you might say, well, isn't this rook on f7 just hanging? And you would be right, but if we capture with the rook, queen g2 would be checkmate. That would be a pretty cold shower. So we can't go g7 check because the rook covers it. We have to take with the pawn. Now we're threatening f8, leading to checkmate. But Black's got this amazing defensive resource, rook to f8. And this is actually a draw, despite Black being down in exchange in a pawn. Because our best plan is actually just to support this f7 pawn. We've got no way to force this pawn through. The key squares on this diagonal are covered. Black's still threatening to exchange the queen for the rook pair. So, for example, we might go queen e6, and then Black's got queen c5, rook e3, and then he can start to activate the bishops with bishop g5, maybe bring the bishop d5, attack this queen, and again all these key squares are covered. So despite the fact that Black's got no pawn cover, his king is completely safe, which is mind-boggling. Anyway, Black didn't see this, he played queen c5 check, now rook 1 f2, f takes, and queen g5. Queen's forced to capture, but it doesn't matter because after bishop g5, rook f8, rook f8, rook f8, king g7, we've got stunning move, g takes h7. Now if the king captures the rook, we queen and win the game. If the king captures the pawn, we play rook f7 and pick up this bishop. So here, Black resigned the game. Now I think this was amazing attacking display from Fischer. It was quite a simple elemental Pawnstorm, a simple plan we can all learn from. Fischer made some mistakes, but he got there in the end. So I hope you really enjoyed this video, you got something useful out of it, and thank you for watching.